I've always considered myself a generally positive person. Always been a fan of comedies over horror films. I prefer going to a theme park rather than a haunted house. Generally speaking, if something has a bright color or a dark theme, well, I'm going Mario. So naturally, Metroid just never appealed to me in my youth. Mario, Sonic, Donkey Kong, and even Zelda passed the book by its cover test for me. And even when I played a Metroid game as a kid, when I started moving to the right and figured out I'd have to move back to the left on the screen, I quickly scoffed at the thought that these so-called video game designers were not following the conventional design. You gotta move right to beat a game. But the older I got, the more Metroid started to appeal to me, or at the very least pique my interest. While I had never played the early Metroid titles at the time of their release, I always kept up with the news, kept up with the fandom. I mean, it's a giant Nintendo IP. Why wouldn't I? And I don't know, at some point, something just clicked. But it didn't click with the early titles, it clicked with Zero Mission. And for a long time, I thought Zero Mission was the best 2D Metroid title. A big part of me still thinks it is, for a lot of reasons. But my love and enjoyment of Zero Mission created a Metroid fan out of this one-time rejecter of the series. Now, unlike many other franchises, I'm actually not in the Metroid zone, the fandom, the forums, the public opinions. I've watched a few videos here and there, but not nearly as much as you think I would watch considering I've played pretty much every game in the series. A series that started off in 1986. Where we'd follow Samus on planet Zebes as she attempts to retrieve the predatory Metroid organisms that were stolen by the space pirates, with an evil ploy to use them as biological weapons to destroy Samus and all who oppose them. Now, okay, let's cut to the chase. Metroid 1 kinda sucks. I don't say that to be antagonizing. I know that for many people they may have loved it, but yeah, no, I don't like this one. Actually, let's peel back. I feel like I'm being mean. Let's say somebody was to give me Metroid 1 and say, hey, this is Metroid, this stars Samus, that girl from Smash Bros. Play it. I'd be like, yeah, it sucks. But in the greater context of things, if like you know the Metroid franchise and you know where it started and you know where it's going and what it's been through, and you come to this game with an open mind, using a guide because God help you if you don't, then yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. But it's fun like going to a museum is fun. It's fun like seeing pictures of your parents in their youth fun, like that kind of fun. But damn can it be hard sometimes. Specifically in the early game, where it starts you off as this just weak character. You can't shoot more than a few feet forward, you try to move to the right, you can't advance, so then you gotta go back and move to the left and you get your Marumari. And once you get that, you get to go back to the right, crouch down into the ball, rinse and repeat, do that a couple hundred times and the game is over. And that's because this is a Metroidvania. You advance through the game by backtracking over and over again, being a little bit more powerful with more power-ups every single time you backtrack, enabling you to use your newfound powers to reach new areas in the old locations that you've already been to. It's genius. This allows an arena, a giant layout, to feel like it's exponentially larger because the context of being in the room early on is very different than the context of being in that room quite a while later when you're significantly more powerful. The problem is with the first title is that you don't even have a map, and many of the stages feel very samey with plenty of assets being repeated. So similar to the NES Legend of Zelda, for example, if you're not drawing a map or using some form of a guide along your path, you may very easily feel like you've been here before, and you probably have. The game starts you off weak. It starts you off with low health. When you take a hit, your health drops drastically, and you start to think, do I really have to go through this entire game with such a little maximum health? Only to realize as you move forward that you can increase that maximum health by quite a lot. And you're going to want to, maybe even need to increase that maximum health. The same way you're going to have to increase the distance your pea shooter can fire by finding the long beam. And this is more or less how Metroid games will play. They'll even make a habit of starting you off at maximum power and then just stripping that all away from you to make you think about what you can become if you just persevere. And that perseverance makes it all the more memorable. With the first game on the NES, if you were to play it today and complete it, you could tell very clearly it was an NES title just by the way you feel when you finish it, because you'll probably get up and celebrate. When I defeated Mother Brain, I'm pretty sure I audibly gasped, and no other Metroid game has ever put me through the ringer the way this one did. Metroid on the NES was not perfect by any means, but it was iconic. It was the birth of a subgenre, a staple of the gaming industry, made all the more iconic because when you make it to the end of the game, depending on how quickly you're able to get to that ending, Samus will relax and remove her armor, with more being removed depending on how quickly you finish the game. If you take long, you might only see Samus's long hair. It could still just be a dude from the valley that was going for the wavy look. But the utmost certainty that the world's greatest gaming bounty hunter is a lady was rewarded only to the gamers that could truly accomplish the adventure in the shortest amount of time, letting you in on the historic secret and allowing you to be the kid on the playground nobody believes when you tell them that Samus is a girl, and you can only find out if you become the best. And something about that sentiment is weirdly nostalgic for me, even though I was not around in the 80s. Now, as for Metroid 2, I feel like this one has aged much better than the first NES title. I will admit that you need to play this at least somewhat colorized so you can tell the difference between certain sprites on the screen, but because everything is more zoomed in, there's a lot more detail towards the sprites, and you can see just that little bit more effort put into this one. And while it may seem like they had much less to work with the smaller real estate, since the game was designed with that in mind, the larger sprites and the level layouts were streamlined in order to fit these technical limitations. Due to the way the stages lay out, it is actually significantly harder to get lost in Metroid 2 than it is in the first Metroid game, making it, in my opinion, a much better sequel. And the objective here is actually a lot simpler to follow along. You'll quickly pick up your missile tanks, energy tanks, bombs, and an ice beam, and you have one simple mission. You need to wipe out the entirety of the Metroid species. Because with the success of Samus Aran's mission on the planet Zebes, the defeat of the space pirates and their leader, the Mother Brain, the Galactic Federation were concerned that the space pirates were trying to weaponize the parasitic Metroids, and they wanted to make sure nothing like that would happen again. As a result, they decided to completely annihilate the Metroids to make sure they won't be able to spread across the galaxy. So they went straight to SR-388 in an attempt to wipe out the species. And since they failed, they once again hired Samus, a lone bounty hunter, to enter a planet with no help or guidance and go through the bleak and dark adventure and accomplish her mission for the sake of the galaxy. I actually think this game could be completely finished without using external help, like a map of some sort, but I do think it's a lot more fun if you have just a generic map that doesn't tell you where all the power-ups are. That allows you to kind of get a feel for how everything is laid out in the giant areas that you're surrounded by, without ruining the mystery of finding all of the different power-ups. The game is kind of designed in a manner where you'll always hit a dead end and feel like you need to walk yourself backwards, and during that time while you feel lost, you'll run into a new path that opened up as you advanced. So as you're playing through the game, you might not realize it, but the game is actually guiding you when you think you're lost and going in circles. But outside of the more focused map layout, it still feels like a Metroidvania. The mission here is front and center. There's a counter on the corner of your screen that draws a lot of attention to itself so that you can keep an eye on it. Those are your targets. You have to kill them. And with every Metroid defeated, the timer will drop down. The game will also guide you by giving you some audible cues so that you know when one is nearby. But you'll also quickly learn that those Metroids that look like jellyfish are actually still in their larval state, because you'll run into a larger one known as the Alpha Metroid. And then eventually you'll hit the Gamma Metroids, the Zeta Metroids, and the Omega Metroids. The Alpha Metroids only need 5 missiles. The Gamma, Zeta, and Omega Metroids, you're looking at 10, 20, and 30 missiles to defeat them. They're a lot more aggressive, and they do a much better job hiding their weak points. But once again, as long as you persevere, you'll make it towards the end of the title. You'll get the counter down to 1 Metroid. You'll make your trek along the long corridor, use your endless jumps to fly through the caverns, and then all of a sudden you'll notice your counter go back up to 9. And you can tell by the ambiance, by the noise, by the vibe, and by the fact that you had an ice beam what exactly was about to occur. And at that point, you encounter your first larval Metroid. I swear the challenge against these things is a lot more enjoyable than their evolved forms, because the thought of them gripping onto me and draining my health is genuinely terrifying, and it built so much suspense. And after you take them all down, you'll make it to the Queen. This was the ultimate Metroid. It's an alien, a monster, that would make the fiercest of warrior tremble. And she packs a punch. I don't know how anyone would figure it out without a guide. I knew this just by being involved in the Metroid community long enough. but you have to actually roll up into a ball and jump in her mouth while she's stunned and plant the bombs inside her to blow her up, which is just so cool. And you still gotta watch your health because you're actually losing it while you're inside her. But once you defeat her, you'll find an egg. A baby will be born. It's kinda cute. It thinks Samus is its mother, so it'll latch onto her and help her through the cavern, destroying indestructible blocks along the way. The vibe is one of victory, of success, and accomplishment. This newfound hatchling is the first friend you've had in 2 games, and it takes you to the end of the game, out of the cave and onto the ship. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. Well, until we got to the Super Nintendo and just did the first game all over again. Except this time, it's frickin' gorgeous, it's phenomenal. Listen, by modern standards, I think that Super Metroid's controls could be pretty clunky, especially compared to the 2 games on the Game Boy Advance and the ones beyond it. But if you take that little bit of effort to adapt, yeah, this one's good. You'll probably get lost once or twice, but that's all part of the experience. Every time you get lost, you'll run around the map and you'll just get stronger and stronger. But the game is actually prepping you for the end, because once you get to the end, if you are not at absolutely peak form and strength, you're gonna have to backtrack anyway and level up as much as you possibly can. You're gonna need every energy tank, every health bar, every power-up imaginable to make it through the end game. An end game that gets teased early on because you walk into a room with a statue on it that just has these glowing eyes, and it's like, okay, at some point I'm gonna have to come back here. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Super Metroid is easily the first complete experience in the series. In the same manner that Link to the Past took the NES Zelda and made it actually playable without a million outside sources, Super Metroid could almost be considered a reimagining of Metroid 1 because it's a game that you could actually go through without any outside guidance. When I was playing Metroid 2, I mentioned that the best thing to do was to have some kind of a minimalistic map just to kind of keep you in the right track. Super Metroid literally gives you a minimalistic map, and as a result, it's so much better. It does just enough to guide you without holding your hand. It helps track where you've been and which new areas and shortcuts you managed to find. There'll be the slightest little dot on a map just to indicate that there's a collectible in the area, but you're required to figure out how to collect it. And you're going to want to collect it because if you want to get through this game, if you want to be strong, if you want to be the best, it's not about figuring out attack patterns and mastering the timing in the boss fights. It's about making sure you're thoroughly prepared when you get to them. I found this game easy, but it was easy because I put the time into making it easy. So when I made it to the bosses and I took hundreds of units of damage from them, I still had a good 20% or so of health remaining. I barely had to dodge, but I earned that. I earned the right to coast through the massive boss fights because I searched a lot. Now, whether that search was because I was curious or because I was lost, doesn't matter. The important thing is I did the time and I reaped the reward, especially in the end game. But the way the game starts you off is very different. You don't start off with those boss fights. It starts off with one of the most chilling introductions to any classic game I've ever played. This is a horror thriller. The way the title screen comes up, there are dead human scientists on the floor with your standard press start blinking. It's hard to remember that this is a Nintendo title. It's just so eerie, so not Nintendo. The game actually starts off with Samus giving us a quick recap via text and a more modern looking cutscene of what occurred in the first 2 games. She reminds us that she destroyed the Queen Metroid and the baby hatched and helped her escape from SR-388. Well, actually, she says it followed her, but that must be a pride thing because that baby Metroid definitely helped us beat Metroid 2. She refers to it as a confused child, because in essence, this Metroid developed a bond with Samus, and it thinks she's her mother. She notes that she immediately took the baby Metroid to the research station on Ceres to allow them to study its qualities. The scientist suggested that the Metroid's powers could be harnessed for the good of civilization, and as soon as Samus left Ceres, there was a distress call. She had to return. They were under attack. She jumps into the ship, makes her way through the dark corridors. She gets to the room that was shown in the title screen, along with a very much dead and blood-ridden scientist on the floor, finally making it into the next room where she found the Metroid. And from the shadow emerges none other than Ridley. Samus immediately attacks Ridley, but it's all for nothing. Ridley grabs the Mother Egg and flies off. The ship was going to self-destruct, and with Samus quickly escaping and the research station exploding in the background, she heads straight back to where the journey all began. The space pirates' home base. Planet Zebes. The planet that she was certain she destroyed. You know how it goes. Park the ship, head indoors, make your way down past a few tunnels, drop down an eerily familiar vertical shaft, enter the same lair you defeated the Mother Brain in, and question if the space pirates are still there. The area looks untouched, it looks abandoned, until you make it to the elevator, work your way down, find yourself back to where you were on Metroid 1 with the morph ball exactly where you left it. Only this time, you'll realize there's an actual surveillance camera, which means somebody is watching. And that's when the Metroiding starts. That's when the whole formula comes back into it. You grab what you need, you find a new place to advance, you become more powerful, find more hidden items, get lost a whole ton, experience some larger-than-life boss battles, and eventually you're equipped enough to enter Ridley's lair. And they put him in the same room he was in during the fight in the original Metroid. Basically, a cage match. I used up every single one of my power bombs in the middle of the room. I used 35 of my super missiles. That's 30 power bombs, 35 super missiles, and a couple of regular missiles, and the giant beast finally went down. And the terrifying thing was how little health I had remaining. If I didn't have a reserve tank, I never would have beaten him. It was actually at this moment, this fight against Ridley, that I understood the value of this title. Because as I played through this game, I got lost. I got lost a lot. Maybe close to 3 hours of being blind and running around and not knowing where I was going. But in reality, once I faced Ridley, I realized something. That I was not lost, I was preparing myself, specifically for this fight. If I hadn't gotten lost, I'd have came here, easily been wiped away by Ridley, and begrudgingly would have had to go and rescale the entire map all over again to better prepare myself for this fight. Since I was lost, I spent so much time being curious, a lot of time looking in places I had no business looking, and so many moments being frustrated beyond belief that I just could not find the next power-up, the next key, the next checkpoint, the next significant hidden aha moment that would allow me to pass through. And while I spent all game thinking all of these powers were well and good, but I just wanted to get on with it, when I defeated Ridley, and I glanced over at my ammo and my health, I realized that none of it was a waste of time. It was all a means to an end, and that gave me so much joy that I struggled to even put it into words. With the defeat of Ridley, you're given more of a chance to search one last time as you make your way back to the beginning of the game to get to the room with the statue. And after what I had just endured, I spent even more time searching. I left no stone unturned, because if it took me all of that effort to make it past Ridley, I could not imagine how much stronger I needed to be to get through the end of the game. I was adamant that I had to be prepared, and when I finally felt like I reached a point where I was ready, I entered the mysterious hallway, I walked into the golden statue room, and I saw the remaining statues dissolve and create a passageway below for me, taking the elevator down to Turian just like I did on Metroid on the NES. And I was immediately greeted by Metroids. The space pirates have found the formula. They've managed to properly clone these things. There was no music at this point. It was such a bizarre feeling. Remember, in 1994, this was the introduction of many kids to the series. Many people who the SNES was their first console. And these little Metroids just look so much more menacing in 16-bit than they did in the previous games. And they're causing a commotion. It's a terrible thought that Samus might be too late and that the experiment was completed. Every room you enter requires you to defeat all of the Metroids in order to move on. And every room has more challenges and more obstacles in your way as you take those Metroids on. And then you finally make it into a room with a side hopper and a whole load of sand, followed by another room with a Chozo statue which just dissolves when you barely even touch it. And you'll find more ashed up enemies that dissolve until you get to this point that a side hopper slowly approaches you. This thing definitely didn't cause the mess. And I doubt that everybody was being so frantic because they were running away from it. But as Samus starts to shoot the side hopper, thinking that she could just keep moving forward until she finds the true boss of the game, she's interrupted by what I can only describe as a super freaking pumped up Metroid. The first time I saw this, I jumped. Look at this thing. What in the actual hell were the space pirates able to do to it? Is this what they're trying to weaponize? How much crap did they pump into it? All of these thoughts just fluttered through my head, and I frantically started unloading everything I could at it. I was just mashing buttons at this point, and just as I thought I was going to have to restart because I was down to 1 health point, the Metroid let go of Samus. Why? Was it trying to weaken her? Was it trying to guide her? Maybe when it attached to Samus, it was able to connect to the baby Metroid? And that's when it hit me. This was the baby Metroid. The Metroid let go of Samus because it immediately felt remorse and regretted the encounter. It's realized that it almost killed its own mother, and there was something so sad about that. At the end of the last game, it was almost like a cute little pet to have around, and look what they've done to it now. It's a freak, a monster, and as such, they deserved all of the damage it caused. Everything beyond this point in the game was just quiet. There's nothing alive. There was no music. You get to the newest Mother Brain lair and realize that she is also still alive. But it all felt so off. On the NES game, defeating her was an absolute nightmare. This was a joke, and of course it was, because she popped up and was an actual behemoth. I unleashed everything onto her. Power bombs, super missiles, regular missiles, charge shots. I thought I was doing well, but I was taking a lot of damage. And just as I started to understand why they gave me a save point just before this fight, the monster unleashed its absolute wrath onto Samus. But I guess that was the whole fight, because Samus couldn't move. Mother Brain was just about to finish her off. But what she forgot to account for was the giant monster they created that loved its mom. And with the very path to this room that Samus created after her encounter with the Super Metroid, it managed to enter this lair and latch onto the Mother Brain. It sucked so much life out of her that she turned purple, and then she turned green. And then the Metroid attaches to Samus and gives her all of that energy, quickly healing her back to full health. But then all of a sudden, Mother Brain jumps back up and unloads onto the Super Metroid. But the Metroid won't relent. It got Samus to full health, and with cracks in its body and discoloration, it charges towards the Mother Brain before all of a sudden, the Mother Brain killed the Metroid. And in its final act of heroism and defiance against the space pirates that treated it as nothing but a specimen, it dissolved and gave all of its energy and powers to Samus. And for the second game in a row, the baby Metroid has given its mother a clear path to victory.